The Aussie Fire podcast is a collaboration between Strong Money Australia and Pearler, Australia's favourite boring long-term investing platform. Join our hosts, Dave from Strong Money Australia and Hayden from Pearler, as they discuss all things financial independence. At Aussie Fire, we're big fans of sharing experiences and talking about money. However, please note that any advice is general and does not consider your financial situation, needs, or objectives. Consider whether it's appropriate for you and, if in doubt, speak to a licensed financial advisor.
Hey everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Aussie Fire. So today we want to talk to you about the topic of higher education, like university, and how it stacks up from a financial perspective. Because if it's someone's goal to become wealthy and relatively free at a youngish sort of age, it's worth thinking about, does university actually help with that goal, or does it actually slow you down? So there's a few different ways we can talk about that today.
So for some of you, this might be quite relevant. Maybe you're about to study or are currently studying. Though for others, it's possible that you're already past this point in your life. But it's still an interesting topic, so we figure it's worth talking about. And in this episode, we will look at the pros and cons of going to university versus going straight into work, share our own experiences, which have differed a lot, which should be pretty useful, and hopefully give you some things to think about that might help you either make some decisions or reflect on your own.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting, mate, because like you just hinted at there, we've done basically the opposite. We've taken the opposite path from one another. So it'll be good to discuss this from different angles in a way that two people who kind of took the same path won't be able to. So let's just get straight into it and let's run through some of the arguments that you hear about why going to uni is the better choice if you like to create a more prosperous financial future, let's say.
Yeah, so I mean, the most common one you'll kind of hear people say is, uni costs money, but it will allow me to earn a higher income over time. Essentially, I will recoup the investment. It's an investment in yourself. The best thing you can invest in is your own education. You've kind of heard it thrown a whole bunch of different ways. And there is a lot to show that most higher education, or at least a very specific part of it, will typically lead to, a higher skilled job, higher wages. You get the kind of classic cliches of, medicine and lawyers and things like that, which definitely has some truth to it. There's also the kind of network that it brings. University for a lot of people isn't just the courses that you do. It's being surrounded by a whole bunch of other fairly, smart, motivated, industry relevant people. And there's a number of degrees out there where the people you meet at university are actually as big a part of your career as the content that you learn. So even though you say, okay, I could just teach this to myself on the internet or something like that, it's the people you meet along the way that have a huge impact. And I guess there is also the other benefit of the accreditation. Kind of depends what you study. Some degrees you kind of need it to do lines of work, other degrees less so. I studied programming basically at uni, like computer programming, and that was less relevant at the time. But I had friends that did say law or medicine again, and they really needed that. I mean, that's just a few things to throw at you, Dave. All sounds like a no-brainer, right?
No, like that's quite interesting, mate. There was one thing there that I wanted to touch on. So I took the opposite path of this and basically just went straight to work. So I don't have the kind of experience or knowledge in this area. And you touched on something which was networking. So that's something that I've heard is a big factor in uni and can be a valuable source essentially of either soon to be opportunities for work or later opportunities for work based on the people that you're kind of connecting with while you're at uni. Is that like, that's something I've heard, but how realistic is that when you think about the average uni student? How broadly does that apply? Or is that just sort of a narrative that has started to is that just a narrative that has been created? How much truth is there in that?
That's a good question. I think if I could answer it by first, if I could separate out, there's things you learn at uni or degrees or programs or whatever, that it's really just going to come down to the fact that you're doing that program and that leads into this job and you're going to get this income. And a lot of the other stuff is noise. Medicine is, again, the kind of fairly classic example. Like, you go study medicine for a long amount of time, you practice for a long amount of time, you train up, it pays itself off over a very long period, and you can kind of, see that. Something like I remember reading years ago that a doctor eventually becomes more wealthy than a plumber, but it's not till they're 43 or something like that, But if we get past those ones where it's like you can't do that high earning thing unless you've done the degree, because by contrast to that medicine one, there might be something like, say, business studies. People go study business studies because they want to become a manager, or they want to look after a part of a business, or they want to start a business or something like that. And whilst those degrees might help, at the end of the day, you can still get into that area and do that stuff without it if you really try, right? Same with a lot of art stuff. And I think if you focus in on that part where you don't strictly need the degree to succeed, the networking part is, I'd say, fairly huge, because it's just much more like open-ended, it's like, okay, sure, you network in some fields like medicine, great. They're not just going to give you a job because you know someone. You actually need hard qualifications, right? Like, really hard, like you need to have passed this and done this and gotten that certification. But in areas where you don't need that, networking, I guess, is quite massive, because people are just looking for individuals they trust. So I think what I want to say mostly about it is that it really is one of those, like, what you put in is what you get out, and it's super contextual based on the field and the university, right? Like, the university I studied at UNSW in Sydney, we have an absolutely massive amount of people studying like computing. I don't know the exact numbers. Someone once told me it's like a third of all of the people in the country. And when you have that, you're just in the middle of a big pool. But also, if you don't turn up for the social events, if you don't turn up to the kind of random workshops and activities, and you don't do more, you're not just going to kind of stumble into a classroom and, just kind of suddenly build a network. So they are a real thing. And the reason a lot of people wouldn't leverage it is either because it's not relevant to their field, or they can't get much, or more likely that they just don't want to spend the time with it, if that makes sense, because it can take quite a lot of time. And I could probably go further, but I spent huge amounts of time at university, spare time, weekends, doing student-related random volunteer activities, and that paid itself massively off. But like, shit, that was a lot of time spent on my end too.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That sheds a lot of light. Thanks for that, man. The other thing that seems to get mentioned quite a lot with regards to going to uni is that the career that you end up in will be more kind of long lasting and more stable. So there tends to be an assumption that university degrees and higher level education will lead to jobs that have greater stability, obviously, because you're more sort of specialized, it's harder to get that job. So those people are more valued, or those jobs tend to be jobs that last a longer time. But so I would agree with that in general. That's harder to replace people that are higher in level of qualification. I'd like to get your thoughts on how much you think that applies if we look forward like 10 years, because obviously the world's changing relatively quickly with regards to what skills and knowledge and experience and that is valuable in society. And so I'd like to get your thoughts on if you think that that's true, and whether you think that will also continue for the foreseeable future.
There's so much to unpack, Dave.
That's an easy question, mate. What are you talking about?
If you don't want to work with your hands, then university will add some job security for you. I'd probably say that. So what I mean by that is, when I say your hands, it's like if you just want to kind of sit at a desk, then yeah, being an untrained person, just getting whatever job you can is going to probably be worse for you than getting university educated.
In terms of stability, like job stability long term.
Stability. Yeah, but I mean, I think there's fair evidence from what I've seen in my view that the best long-term job stability right now are going to be anyone who does stuff with their hands, right? This can be university educated people or not. It's everyone who mostly sits at a desk, at a computer, at home, whatever, all day, that's probably got the biggest risk. So yeah, I mean, it's easy to call university adding more stability, but I think that's only really with reference to like the more unskilled versions of what they might do. A good example could just be, working at a reception or working at a call center. Yeah, I mean, university gives you way above that. But if you're a Sparky, tradie, anything like that, I can't imagine how university could give you an edge over them these days, just with everything that's gone on in the last 15 years with AI.
Maybe we'll unpack the AI thing a little bit later, mate. So, I mean, university is sounding like it's got a fair few benefits from this point, but what would the downsides be? The first one that I can think of that you mentioned before is that you have to take on some debt. And now this isn't debt that has to be like promptly repaid. You can repay it sort of slowly over time as your income goes up, from what I understand. But that's definitely something to keep in mind. And it is a financial burden, let's say, that you have to sort of recoup or repay later. It can also take you longer to earn a good income. So from what I understand, some people from uni, they'll start at relatively lower level positions in that job, that like graduate type wages, right? Where you're not earning, you're technically qualified, but you're not actually earning very good income out the gate. And it can take quite a few years for your income to get to a level where you're actually really happy with it and getting the benefits of your uni degree. So that's something to consider as well. Do you want to unpack that a little bit so people can understand what that means in practice?
Yeah, like I had a friend, right? Mechanical engineer. She went to university, 18 years old, graduated when she was, say, 22, then so basically earning no money in that time and building up like $40,000 of debt. Then from the age of 22 gets a job, like a very complicated job, right? A job like you and I could not do, to do with lots of math and engineering knowledge. Gets paid, I think, like $72,000 a year, something like that. Does that for 4 years till quite recently. Now ends up looking for another job where they might pay like 130, something in that kind of realm, right? And it'll probably kind of keep going up from there. So when you think about it, that's pretty crazy. Basically, if you take that 75K a year over an 8-year period, she's earned like an average of like $32,000 a year, and probably hasn't been able to save much anyway because it's just not a huge amount. But what it will probably mean for her in the long term is that she will have a less physically demanding job, still earning a relatively good income, but there's a big delay there. And to your points about taking on debt and slowing that kind of income time, I'd probably say that slowdown is worse than the debt, just because of the nature of how HECS works. It's pretty like low.
It's not that bad.
Impact.
Yeah.
The delay is quite real. And I know I have plenty of people in my life that have tried to speed up their degree or start it early or anything they can, just because they want to start that first dollar of income in the door quickly. Because
yeah, it's a really big time commitment, isn't it? And it's a really big, I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, it's almost like a weight that's kind of holding you back. Like you're forced to put in that amount of time, and you're, like you said with that example, there's 8 years of not earning, like you're not earning a high income. You're putting in all this training and all this effort and all this time, and then you start working and your income's not that high yet, and you've got an 8-year period where you're earning that would be less than a full-time average income. So that's quite a long period.
It's phenomenal. And like my dad, who's an electrician, he used to work, well, he still does probably, it's like on building solar farms, like in, remote Australia. And he would say there's a bunch of like 19-year-olds, apprentices and stuff that would turn up. They'd be getting paid like 6 digits, sometimes maybe close up to 200, because it's all the FIFO work, right? You probably know a bunch of people from Western Australia, right? I know you guys are quite big on the fly in, fly out stuff. And man, you do earn more in the longer term, but you do have to really make up for someone like that who's earning well into 6 figures from the age of 18. You need to really make sure you've got a good trajectory on you. Otherwise, it might just be an expensive endeavor, university.
One of the things that I was going to touch on later is I suppose maybe you can talk about your experience with people in this area, but the whole thing that used to cause me to question uni and people that go to uni was, I knew several people that went to uni rather than going to start work straight away, and a number of them actually got their qualifications right, and then they started doing that job in reality and they didn't like that job. So then all that time was basically for nothing, because they ended up going to do something else instead, something else that was non-uni qualified. And then a couple of other people flip-flopped halfway through uni and changed to something else because they didn't like it. So they'd also sort of lost that period of time where they'd spent 2 years and they were 2 years into something, and then they're like, okay, I really don't think this is for me. I'm going to change and do something else. And it's good that they realized relatively early that they wanted to change to something else. But I just see that, I suppose, that risk and that commitment that people are making at such a young age. How are you supposed to friggin' know that that's what you want to do for the next 40 years, man, and commit for 4 years of study and then put in all this effort, and you really don't know if you're actually going to like that job in reality? Do you know people who've had a similar experience to that?
Yeah, I couldn't even tell you how many I could count, Dave.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's quite prevalent then.
It's super prevalent. No, it happens all the time. I mean, I wouldn't even blame the people. It's kind of, I mean, as older adults now, it's kind of, our responsibility because
it's not their fault, man.
We just send them into uni.
How are you supposed to know? You're 18 years old. You're 18 years old. How are you supposed to know, what are you going to want to do for the next 40 years? It's ridiculous.
We just send them in. We just send them in and be like, there you go, good luck. And I mean, I do have people, I do see people that go get a job and be like, oh, this isn't quite what I wanted. And I was always inspired at uni by a few people I met who had typically left high school. They'd gone and done 2 or 3 years of work. And then while still quite young, they went straight into uni and they just powered through it because they knew exactly what they wanted to do by that point, because they kind of had a job, and it was so much clarity, because like even me, like a bunch of us are just kind of around, because uni's like high school these days for a lot of people. It's just the next thing you go do.
Extended
right?
high school.
Exactly. And it's so dangerous. And some of us get lucky. Like I feel like I got quite lucky because I happen to stay interested in what I do, and there's good work in the field. I think one thing I would say is a very careful thing people have to avoid is they get halfway through a degree and then they think, I don't like it, I might change. And then someone says, oh, you're already halfway through it, you should keep going and just finish it.
That sunk cost fallacy.
It's so, I feel, I try and convince everyone I can on that. I'm like, it makes no sense. You don't apply that to nearly anything else of significance in your life, like, because you'll just regret it. Like just particularly given how cheap the debt is. Like HECS debt's real, but the way that the Australian government structured it, God bless them, it makes a lot of sense to be relatively low burden. Like it doesn't hurt you unless you're earning a lot of money as a general rule, So yeah, I see it all the time. And it is a big problem, is not the problem with the university strictly, but just the entire culture of, oh, you just do that after high school. We'll figure it out later.
All right, so we've covered quite a few things in the uni side of the discussion, mate. Let's move on to the choice of going straight to work and not worrying about uni at all. What should we say about that?
Is this the Dave Gow approach?
This is the Dave Gow approach, mate. Except I'll skip the part where you drop out of school. We'll just make that part. That's optional.
I mean, I guess you tell me, because when I finished high school in like regional New South Wales, the people who didn't go to uni were generally either the ones who couldn't get in or the ones who had high convictions about their careers, and their career didn't require training that needed university. So maybe if I could start there, broaden my horizon of
interesting
the people outside of those two buckets.
So I had neither of those things, I suppose. I maybe the first one, I probably couldn't have gone because I didn't finish school. So that's one thing. Yeah. I had absolutely zero conviction of what I wanted to do. So I suppose I don't meet that criteria. I had honestly no idea whatsoever what I wanted to do. I found the whole question just perplexing. How am I supposed to know? There's like a million different options and I don't know. I just felt too young to sort of make that decision. So I suppose the other thing that ties into that part of the discussion, mate, is some people just don't enjoy school type learning all that much, whether it's just because you're sitting and doing a lot of book work or following instructions, or it just seems kind of boring. Even if you're interested in the subject, it's just you're either watching videos or reading texts and doing different exercises and stuff. There's just a different, that kind of element and that kind of way of teaching and learning just doesn't really gel with certain people. So there's always going to be that that cohort of the population to where starting work and starting to earn money and starting to do things in the real world rather than additional schooling is going to be far, far more attractive. And so that was the case for me. From honestly about 15 or 16, I just wanted to get out of school and start working basically straight away. I'd gotten to the point where I was just sitting there. I'm like, I'm not really getting anything out of this and I don't know what else I want to learn, but I would rather just start working.
But that wasn't an interest in money though. It was like you just wanted to get out of this stupid classroom.
Just do something else. It just felt more productive to go and work and do something practical in the real world than to sit and look at a blackboard or something for another few years and then pick something random that I don't even know what I want to do for another 4 years. It just seemed insane to me for my personality or my mindset. I'm not sure, but I just couldn't. That's just not something that I wanted to do. So I pretty much started working as soon as I could and started enjoying it straight away, like from age 15. So school naturally dropped off in interest level from that point. But yeah, the idea of learning quickly, like learning things on the job and in the real world and starting to obviously earn money, which allows you to have a bit more freedom and a bit more options as a young person, that was far more interesting than just continued learning in subjects I wasn't super passionate about, I would say. And then obviously as a young adult, that can make a huge difference because then you get to learn and save and start building wealth at a younger age. And then obviously if you've got an appetite or an ambition to become sort of financially independent or have a different sort of a lifestyle in the future, you can start making progress in that direction from a much younger age.
Yeah, sure. That makes sense. I think in particular, because you were back in the day when you could leave school in year 10 without a job too, right?
You can't do that now? What do you mean? What do you mean? Am I missing something?
No, I mean, it's a very random tidbit, but when I was in year 10, I think it was the first year, we all got assembled in the school and they said, you aren't allowed to leave anymore unless you have like a job, like base. I don't know what the requirement was, but it was like you have to have a job contract or like TAFE or something. And I think that was actually quite a big culture change from what I could tell for the years after, and that started getting more people to university because the year before me, I think we'd have 50% of people leave in year 10. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
The year after me, it was like 20% because it's like a 16-year-old who isn't certain of what they want to do is not going to like leave most of their friends to go do some random job that they're not that passionate about. So then they just stay till year 12 and then you're in the system and then you're in university. I read this quote a year ago, Dave, I love, which was like the problem with universities is that they're basically designed to produce professors. And it's just a question of where you fall off in that journey and end up in the workforce. And it's like that, right? Because we there's less support there. So, I mean, I think that's one interesting thing too, because I guess people younger than you probably had more forces that also kept them just keeping going through high school, which is hard.
That's interesting. I hadn't heard about that before. It was more of a cultural thing when I was at school that you should stay if you can stay or you don't have anything else to do. But I don't know. I finished year 11 and then I had a part-time job at that point at Big W and I was working like 25, 30 hours a week. I just enjoyed that immensely more than going to school. So I just did that and I didn't go to year 12. So yeah, I pretty much lost interest as soon as I started working because that was more enjoyable, more kind of fun.
That's awesome. I mean, work is, I would say, on average, a lot better for the brain than study. Like, even as someone who has spent a lot of time studying, like, it's punishing, man. You think about like high school and year 12 and university, you make a mistake and they're like, that's a number and that number's going to haunt you now for years and years, that's going to bring your average down. And then you get into the workforce and you have a bad day at work and everyone's like, oh, it's all right. Let's just start again on Monday. Reset the objectives, Then no wonder so many people I know at university have mental health problems. It's like sometimes like it's kind of sad seeing how much it can affect so many people that don't deserve to be affected by it. But can I tell you one random thing that I actually think sucks about uni that I've picked up on? I, in hindsight, kind of wish I went and got a job for a bit because it took me so many years to unwind the like regressive tendencies of being a university student, like sleeping in or not having much structure.
The lifestyle.
Yeah, because like, maybe if you didn't go to uni, you probably might not be able to picture it. Like, sure, you work hard because you study a lot, but it's pretty unstructured, and you can skip a lot of classes if you really need to, and you could just sleep in till 10 o'clock every day with probably limited repercussions. And 4 to 5 years of that, I think it took me 2 or 3 years out of uni to become an adult, if that makes sense. Like,
wow, that's super interesting. So it's a bit, there's probably too much freedom, and it's a bit too lax in terms of you might actually benefit from a little bit more rigidity in the structure of how you're spending that time, because it makes it harder then to go to a structured lifestyle. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and it's such a weird side effect, because again, I have countless as in I could count 10 off the top of my head, that once they leave uni, they get about a year into work and they just really struggle with mental health, because uni is so exotic. There's just stuff going on all the time. You got friends, you're meeting new people. It's kind of this unreality a lot of the time, particularly if you're an undergraduate, and then you hit a job. It's like 9 to 5 every day,
and that novelty wears off.
Yeah, and they long for it. It's like you get that's what like quarter life crisis kicks in. It's like, this isn't what I want. Like I'm not hanging out with my friends, and it's hard because you are kind of. It's a great experience, but it just, as I said, it's like this weird temporal unreality, which is a huge part of my life, and I'm glad I did. But it just can make it hard to adapt. Which come back to my point about those people that went and got a job before uni for a couple of years. The ones I see the most successful people I've ever met, they went to the darn Defense Force for a couple of years and then went to uni, and even the way they studied and the way they operated was so disciplined that I never had as like a 20-year-old who had no pressure. And I kind of yearn for that. That's definitely my biggest regret, is I wish I didn't give myself such an easy time in that period, if that makes any sense. Yeah,
that's actually quite fascinating. So the people who had an early taste at the workforce, or a more disciplined environment and more disciplined way of living earlier on, seem to do a lot better when they're at uni, and then probably eventually when they reach the full-time workforce again as a fully grown adult, because they had that earlier experience. That's super interesting. I didn't even think about that group of people. I'm just thinking about these two groups of either one goes to work or one goes to uni. But there's this sort of hybrid approach, which is you do a bit of work first and then go to uni and then sort of back to work again. That's pretty interesting.
It's definitely a grass is always greener thing too, because I'm sure there's a bunch of people out there that would see tendencies that I have as a person that I don't realize I have. Like a good example is university. You get really used to working in the evenings or the weekends, or like when you have to, you don't get that really nice psychological separation where you clock out and you can forget about it, because your assignments and your studies, they kind of haunt you for most of the year. They're always there. There's always something you haven't done. And there's probably elements of my personality too I can't self-assess, where I'm probably much more comfortable with that like work bleeding into the non-work time.
It's probably a lot different too, because you're like co-founder of a company versus if you'd just gotten a job out of university. I think you might have gotten better at switching off because you would have had a more like a 9 to 5.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. And I definitely think it's harder for, probably I'd say looking around, it's harder for people who haven't just spent their whole life on like clock in, clock out work to switch off. But it's complicated too, because it's compounded by the fact that a lot of white collar jobs these days don't really have switch off anyway, particularly with all, people emails and everyone's checking it on their phone all the time. I mean, did you ever have a job like that out of curiosity? Because I kind of know talk about Big W and being a forklift driver. Was it always like hop in the car, go home? It's like, that's it till my shift starts.
I've only ever had jobs like that where it's like clock in, clock off.
It explains why you're just so calm all the time.
One thing I wanted to touch on in the getting to work situation was, I suppose I alluded to it a little bit before, mate, but it was around the idea of choosing what you want to do for the next few decades, right? So if you start work instead, there's way more of maybe a mental burden to then switch to a different job if you do something for 6 months or 1 year and you decide, okay, this isn't really this isn't the job I want, or this isn't the industry I want to be in, or whatever. It's a lot easier or a lot less less mental pressure that you're putting on yourself to then go and pick something else and kind of back yourself out of the decision you've already made. Whereas the person at uni,
because you don't have like a 3-year degree behind it.
Yeah, the person at uni, I think, has a lot more stress with that sort of thing. I think the worker finds it a lot easier to kind of pivot to something else. They can test different things and find out what's going to work better for them. And obviously the uni person can do that eventually, but that kind of stretches out the time frame even further, because then you're obviously adapting and experimenting with what you might want to do. So it's tricky, man.
I think that's true. Like sunk cost is a real thing, particularly in areas where people feel like they've gone and done a harder degree for a job than they might be interested in. It's so hard though too, because what's going to happen in those statistics, if you looked at it, was that because we send a lot of the ambivalent people to university anyway, they were probably always going to be ambivalent at the bottom end as well. You know, like if you didn't send them to university, they just end up kind of doing a job and not really knowing and figuring it out later. But regardless of that, you're right. There is that element of like, I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on a HECS debt. If I don't do this type of job, then it's all going to be for nothing. And that's quite a burden on the brain for sure.
I suppose that one of the downsides, we haven't really covered any downsides of working, mate, but one of the downsides definitely is that the majority of the time there is a lower long-term potential to earn a high income. So you'll be more often than not sitting somewhere around, you know, like the average sort of income. You won't be hitting the upper levels of, you know, large six figures for the most part. Obviously there's some certain exceptions, but having lower levels of qualifications or perhaps no qualifications and no formal qualifications at all, obviously that limits your income earning potential. So that's definitely something to keep in mind before we make it sound like just starting work straight away is like the rosiest picture you could imagine.
It's funny, you know, I mean, not to sound too philosophical and stuff, but you mentioned before, you know, we haven't really covered many bad sides to working straight away. And I think what it comes down to for me is that when people are doing the things that they're interested in and are motivated in, they tend to get very wealthy and happy, right? Like wealthy in the most general sense of the word. And the issue is not for me so much of, you know, university and not university. It's like, it's that mantle of people that end up at university because they don't have that kind of idea or conviction yet, or because anyone, like, you know, let's say you go and study, you know, arts or something, nothing stops a normal person to go and whilst they're studying, go and like walk into the ABC Center or go to museums and talk to random staff and just talk to people. The problem is it's hard. It's like hard to motivate yourself to go do all that random shit you don't need to do unless you really care about it. And I think that's kind of the hard part. And then what university de facto becomes is this holding area for people who don't know what they want to do, where you're accumulating debt and delaying income. And once you have that conviction, it's an extremely powerful mechanism, or it not, depending on what you want to do, right? But it's a safe holding pattern.
Yeah, I think that probably the ultimate question is figuring out what you want to do. And so that can be something uni related, it can be not, can be something completely unrelated where you don't need a uni degree at all. But it's just so difficult, man, to figure out what you want to do. And I think a lot of young people struggle with deciding what they want to do because of the pressures that they put on themselves and then probably expectations from others as well, whether it be family or even just seeing friends that seem to have it figured out, like they know what they want to do. That can kind of be like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why don't I know what I want to do? Because I remember seeing people at school like, oh, I want to be this, I want to be that. And I'm just like, oh, how come I don't know? I can't figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, most people don't understand what any of it is, right? Is the problem. You know, what this job is or that job is. And then we talk about careers. And I mean, a job's hard enough to imagine, let alone a career. I didn't think I'd be working in finance. I just wanted to be a software engineer making, you know, Google Maps or something. That was my hope at one point. And now I'm running a company that I own that's quite small that deals with money. That's odd. So, you know, how can we ever expect anyone to figure out exactly what they to pre-plan, right? I mean, to some extent, I think that's the devil. It's like, what are you interested in now? I really think short-term focusing somewhat better, because if someone is motivated, they'll find a way to bounce around and get where they want anyway. You know, like
because you're going to grow as a person over the next 10 years. So you can't possibly know how you're going to feel about something in 10 years. So that means you can't possibly know what you're going to want to do in 10 years. So I think that might be what you're getting at. You have to focus on any little strand of motivation or any little strand of inspiration that you have now to try and like pull at that and just see where it kind of takes you. Because if you've got nothing, which is a lot of people, then you're a bit lost and you kind of have to figure something out.
And it gets hard because you'll think about that strand of interest and then you'll have a darn family member, like a parent or an auntie or an uncle or something.
Don't do that.
Yeah, exactly. Do something longer term. And then it's like, well, that person gets caught up doing God knows what, optometry, and they don't even care about optometry. And then they end up changing to pharmacy because something rather. And then on the flip side, there's people out there I know that went and studied one type of engineering and then realized they actually don't care about what job they get. They just want to make a lot of money. And they're like, I wish I'd study this other thing because I could make more money there. And it's hard to ask an 18-year-old, what's more important to you? Is it the satisfaction of the work you do every day? Or is it how much you get to come home with at the end of the day? Reasonable people don't know the answers to those questions a lot of the time.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said for self-examination, but it's not easy for a young person to understand that they should self-examine and then figuring out from there what path to turn that into.
I will say one of the coolest parts about university is that it really is one of those, like, God, I sound like one of the marketing people now. It's like, it is what you make of it in the sense that it can absolutely be a holding pattern of financial death. But on the flip side, let's say you are a high school student and you don't know what you want to do. Coolest thing about most campuses is there are student societies for everything. There are free events run all the time. They're nearly always open to everyone. So if you are just an 18-year-old and all you have to be motivated for is to figure out what you're motivated for, you don't actually have to know what you want. You could just spend every night of the week a different thing, go to some medicine barbecue, go to some like little arts expedition they've got going on with art students. And if all you do is just roam and chat to people, I reckon 9 times out of 10, someone will pretty quickly figure out within a matter of 3 to 6 months what they want to do. But again, the hard part is that motivation to go and do all that. Because a lot of 18, 19-year-olds, a lot of the time they just want to finally sleep in after high school and go out drinking on the weekend. That's like a pretty common theme.
That's an awesome suggestion though. So follow any little piece of curiosity that they may have and expose themselves to different bits of information and different people who are in different areas, and then something may spark a level of interest that's enough to kind of follow up on and see where it goes.
Did you know, Dave, most universities just have like fully public timetables where you could just like look up any courses, lectures, and just go sit in it as a student? Like it's crazy. Even I didn't think I was thinking like this at the time. Just nothing stopped me learning more except myself.
Is there anything you feel you underappreciated looking back? Is it something like that where you think you could have gotten more out of it if you had done something differently?
Oh, I wish I did more random stuff. I think I say this to a lot of students I meet. University is this incredible time where you don't really care if you're not getting paid because it's the culture. Like you're just a student with no income, learning, like you're just hanging around. And so much of the fun stuff I did was just things that me and friends were doing, engineering projects, society stuff, whatever. I went and ran the tech for like a musical at one point, all the like lights and microphones and stuff at the back. I would never do that now. I'm like a salary worker. If someone said to me, hey, do you want to like every Saturday for 12 hours for the next 2 months go and do this obscure thing? You'd be like, F no. Like, what are you going to pay me for it? Like, unless you're deeply motivated, of course, then you'll do it. Like, there's a bunch. I do stuff for no money all the time, right? It's like it's stuff I really want to do. Whereas uni's this cool time. You can go do a bunch of stuff that you vaguely want to do and just not feel guilty or feel like you're going backwards. And it kind of sounds like bad advice in a way because you're kind of trying to leverage the fact that you've tricked yourself. But it's that's the coolest part. All those random things that you won't do normally later.
Because I suppose life's a lot simpler but back at that point because you don't have any sort of financial burdens and you typically have very low living expenses, so you're not under pressure.
Yeah, because it's the cultural norm, right? You're a uni student. You're not meant to. You're like a car spinning up a plane, spooling up its engines with the brakes on. You're not going anywhere yet, right? Like the end of uni is when the brakes come off and then you're let back into the real world. And that obviously doesn't make a lot of sense if you think about it. Like it is a good idea to work through uni. You can always build up wealth through uni if you want to, right? Uni's 38 hours a week for most young people without kids. Nothing stops them working another part-time job or even a full-time job a lot of the time. So, sky's the limit, but there's just so much cool stuff there. It's the most random circus of random things if you look into it. So I wish I just did more of that, because I did actually try and earn a fair bit of money at uni and get a lot of jobs relevant to my industry, I think. And sometimes I wish I did just go do that, like building a boat in the river activity that some other random society was doing on the weekend and broaden myself out. Because I think I've learned that in my adult life is the older I get, the more I just keep focusing in on something, like I'm not really broadening my skills much as I get narrowing. So, uni is an awesome broadening time, and I just wish I did even more broadening, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. If I reflect on what the path that I've taken, I still can't imagine taking a different path, because even though I'm obviously very interested in finance now, I'm still not interested in getting financial qualifications. Like I don't know what you would call it, but I kind of call it freestyle learning, where I just learn whatever I want to learn at the time. Like, I don't want formal sort of study, and I'm not really interested in learning the theoretical or technical answers to get financial qualifications. That doesn't interest me at all, but I feel like I have enough qualifications. Obviously, that's helped me get somewhere financially in life. And
yeah, I love that idea, because I sometimes refer to it as like unlicensed work, because you like say, you like finance and you want to write about finance. No one checks that you're licensed to write about. Let's be clear. You do have to have some kind of license to write about some things in finance, but it's not like you need a tertiary degree for it.
Well, you're supposed to.
A 3-year degree?
Apparently.
To write about money? Really?
Yeah. It's heading that way, mate.
Yeah. I knew there's some courses you have to do for it. Maybe you're not a good example that I'm trying to paint with, but it's like this whole freestyle learning and learning in your own time thing. It's like I used to tell people, if you're going to uni for something that you can get a job without the degree, if you're really good at it, the best thing you can do is go to uni, study part-time, do one course, like the minimum you want to do, meet everyone, go to everything, teach yourself everything online. And then once you feel like you're smart enough, just quit it. And you would have gotten all the benefits of uni without the kind of financial burdens of it.
So I suppose, speaking of finances, mate, if we bring it back to sort of real world practical application and some numbers, is there a way we can sort of determine whether the sort of return on investment, or whether uni does stack up from a financial perspective in very general, very broad terms? Because obviously it depends entirely on what sort of degree you're getting and whether that's going to pay, and what kind of work you would do otherwise and how much that would pay. But if we can we make some general assumptions? Is there any way to do that where we can come up with some sort of theoretical example? Obviously, we've spoken about the time delay. Obviously, you've got the 4 years time delay, and then you've got maybe a slightly slower speed of income growth over the following sort of 4 to 6 years, versus the person who starts earlier and can probably reach a higher income, in their mid-20s with some experience, but then they're probably capped in many cases at that point, whereas the uni person can sort of keep escalating as they sort of gain more experience and level up as such.
So examples are tricky, because at the end of the day, the results will always come down to the individual. And, a motivated person who goes straight to work out of uni, in my view, will always crush someone who went to uni and did the biggest degree, neurosurgeon who is half-assed about it, if that makes sense. But if we just think about it simply and we say, well, maybe there's more room to grow in, a white-collar university educated job. And that growth might be on average 8% per annum, but there's like a 5-year delay in you getting your first job. Whereas the person who went straight out of high school to get a job, they earn, they start on the same amount, but their salary only grows at 3% per year, right? Two very massive assumptions. That crossover point will be around the age of 35. So, 17 years after they both finish high school, it's interesting because when I say the crossover point, that's like when they both built the same amount of wealth. But the reason these statistics have to be, approached with a little bit of caution is there's so many other factors, right? Like in the favor of the person out of high school, because their salary grew slower, they're going to have actually put less of that into tax. because, you get taxed aggressively at the high end. If they invested, they're going to have built up wealth for years before someone who hasn't. But then on the flip side, it's like people with, university educated backgrounds, depending on the line of work, they might have better, job security. Their high end later on in life might max way out their capacity to work from home, whilst they have kids and a few other things like that. So there's a lot of kind of factors that go into it for sure. I think the main thing is just around how motivated someone is in their career. I think that's been the biggest distinguishing factor I've seen over the years.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. So there's probably way more salary upside for the university educated person, and they'll probably in general overtake the sort of blue collar regular worker type person later in life in terms of income and wealth if they continue on the same trajectory. But then the regular worker gets to kind of compound their money sooner. And I suppose that comes with its own level of options and flexibility in life. So that's worth remembering as well. And I guess another aspect is that don't get me wrong, mate, here, that the higher income person sometimes those jobs also come with a perceived level of
psychological
status,
trauma,
right? And some, not necessarily, but like some expectations that you're supposed to live a certain way because you've got a certain job title and you earn a certain income, right? So there's these expectations from your colleagues and maybe from your family and from your peer group that you should live a certain way. So there can be more pressure put on you to spend more money. So that can lead to greater lifestyle inflation.
Yeah. Or pent-up frustration, right? Of years of not having the money you want.
Yeah. So I spoke with another podcaster, Dev Raga, recently on his show, and he was talking about doctors and how common it is for them to just ratchet up their spending, and it's just kind of what everyone does. And it's just seems to be the way things go, interestingly, with sort of these higher status jobs because of the expectations.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I have to say, one thing that I have found, Dave, real quick, is that for people that go straight out into particularly trades and stuff, or, unskilled work after high school, the one area I do see them win out a lot over university educated people is when they either start a business or buy a business they're working for or get equity in a business they're working for. But as you've probably seen too, that's also one of the quickest ways that a lot of those types of people can end up in very bad financial situations as well. So that's the other kind of big lever I see a lot, because there is a lot of money. I've met hairdressers and everyone else who people might stereotype as being low income jobs, but they take over a business that has good cash flow. Again, they'll be laughing all the way to the bank compared to the university graduates.
Some of the best paid people, man, that I've come across are typically what we think of as blue collar working, almost like Aussie battler type people, and that's tradies, man. Tradies make very, very good coin in this country, and especially if they have their own sort of small business going, they can make excellent income.
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think just kind of reiterates the point that don't ever let university or lack of it kind of drive how you feel like your outcomes are going to go. It pretty much all comes down to individuals and their decisions at the end of the day.
All right, so we've discussed the pros and cons of both going to uni and versus going straight to work, and the different aspects that you want to consider if you're dealing with this decision now, and also kind of reflected on our own experiences and delved into why we made the decisions we did, and then obviously the outcomes from that and the trade-offs inherent in each situation and each path, because as with all things, there are pros and cons to everything. So what will work for one person definitely won't work for another. So it really depends on the situation and the person. And like Hayden said, whether you're able to parlay your choice into a bright financial future is going to be 100% dependent on how much effort and how much focus you put on your finances and how you're able to manage the money that you do earn. Because as we know, it's one thing to earn a good income, but it's a very different thing to turn that good income into some wealth and some freedom later in life. So you definitely want to keep that in mind, regardless of which option you choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my closing comments would be that if university is not interesting for you, then great. Sky's the limit, absolute endless potential in that area. And if you do find yourself at university and you're not really sure what you want to do, or you're not certain, just remember the fact that these are extremely open places with extensive information and countless people you can talk to, other students. All you have to do is spend the time and you'll de-risk that decision massively and figure out kind of what the next step for you is pretty quickly. So yeah, that's it for this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do have any topic suggestions or questions that you'd like to answer on the show, send them to hello@aussiefirepod.com. Or reach out to Dave on socials at Strong Money Australia or myself through Pearler. We do have a few comments starting to come in now, so we'd love more questions and other things that we can tackle in the podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Aussie Fire. For more FI inspiration, head to pearler.com to browse our resources, calculators, and community insights. Pearler is an authorized representative number 1281540 of Sandland Private Wealth Pty Ltd with AFSL number 337927. Knowledge is power, especially when investing. So always seek advice and/or check out the relevant disclosure document for any financial product, including the PDS and TMD before deciding. These are available from the product issuer's website. When you invest, your capital is at risk and past performance is not a reliable indicator of future investment returns.